history of WOW and what fans can expect from the inaugural season of WOW on AXS TV.
Well, going into WOW, I can't lead you into it without saying, I grew up in professional wrestling since I was 13. I'm one of those lucky persons that watched it on TV and was able to get involved in it. I started selling photographs at the matches, and that blossomed into me being an announcer for the Midwest Wrestling when it was a territorial business. And I always saw women in wrestling not treated well. They didn't even get the right locker rooms. They got locker rooms without showers. They weren't treated correctly. And I never sat down and wrote anything out. I just saw it organically. And I was fortunate enough to be an announcer, as I mentioned, for one of the matches. And one of the women's wrestling matches, it was always put on as called in our industry the popcorn match, or the less than match, a gimmick match. And these two women just tore the house down. People were screaming and yelling, and I took the liberty to say, how would you like to see these two women in a cage match? The crowd went crazy. And I asked my boss at the time, who was a gentleman that was The Rock, the Stone Cold, the Hulk Hogan of that era, Dick the Bruiser, hey, we should put more women on the wrestling matches and build them up as the stars. He told me I must have been nuts out of my mind. No one comes to watch women wrestling. And I said, well, we should start a women's wrestling league. He said, are you crazy? No way. Well, when I hear no, that's the first step to get yes. So I just set out and went to gyms looking for wrestlers and putting up posters. They threw me out like I was a nutcase. And I moved west and put an ad in to start what became called Glow, Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. And we changed how women's wrestling looked and how it was presented, and it was a success. And I was fortunate enough to sell it and then move on to a career with ESPN for 18 years. But I always itched to get back to women's wrestling, to really do it correctly. The most aspiring athletic person in the 80s really was Jane Fonda doing videos. And if you look today, every woman today that's in sports is the benefactor of Title IX. They were never told, no, you can't play, you can't do this. They weren't told that's for boys only. And you see it in the athleticism across the board of all women. Every one of them that broke the glass ceiling, from Danica Patrick to Lisa Leslie, to you can't say anything more than Ronda Rousey and know what she did for women at fighting. You put that all into the blender, and it's a new era. It's a new time for women's wrestling, and they're fearless. And Jeanie Buss came to me and said, we've got to do WOW. And we strategically went out to the marketplace. We went from New York, Seattle, Indiana to Florida, and hired a marketing firm to meet with wrestling fans and ask them what they wanted in a wrestling program. Because with digital media today, you can watch wrestling everywhere, and most wrestling leagues have some type of a women's wrestling show, meaning they put on one match. Again, it's still the popcorn match. And we found out that the fans wanted three things. They wanted to see more women's wrestling. And they want the thread that went through every city is the fans said they want to see the fun, F-U-N, back in wrestling. And that was a key component. And they wanted a 1-hour show dedicated to women's wrestling, not just more. And they wanted, third thing, to be able to watch it with their families again. So mom and dad can experience what they did when they grew up and their generation before that grew up. Go to the wrestling matches or watch it on TV. So Jeanie, due to her passion to see these women excel and have a platform that they deserve, she did the marketing expertise to make sure that we had all the groundwork done. And we went out and put together our social media platforms first. Then Mark Cuban from Dallas Mavericks and his president, who's on this call, Andrew Simon, they stepped up and they said, let us help you and let us put WOW on the air. and they have a Friday night lineup, the best in the country, a destination spot for anyone that loves fighting. MMA, AXS TV gives you the best on a consistent basis. Boxing and wrestling. They single-handedly took New Japan Wrestling, brought it to America, and have made it into the best wrestling presentation for pure wrestling fans on the air today. And Mark Cuban, we got to take our hat off to him. He had the vision with Andrew to say, let's package WOW with that. Let's put it on a Friday night. Let's give it a 9 o'clock time slot. So next Friday night, January 18th at 9 o'clock, the paradigm of wrestling is going to change. And you're going to have an all and only all-women's wrestling show on cable TV, which is really spectacular. So I got into it, Sean, through a passion. And I'm fortunate enough now to be living it with great business partners and some of the best athletes you'll ever see when you watch it next Friday night.